So, good day, students. For today, we will be engaging ourselves in the second course pocket of remedial instruction, entitled the Remedial Classroom Organization and Management. As future teachers, we need to ensure that all of our students understands our lesson very well. But for some instances, there are quite a few among your class who somehow fails to keep up. It is our duty to address and accommodate their learning needs. So with all of those being said, organizing a remedial classroom for them is crucial. Likewise, establishing a remedial class for students follows a certain procedure, thus shall be as cohesive and as efficient. But before anything else, let me just remind everyone of our learning objectives and goals for this course pocket. So first, be acquainted with the concepts of remedial classroom. So let us take note of that. Second, express the observations and opinions about the status of remedial classroom and management in Philippine education. And third, explain the value of remedial classroom organization and management. So now that everyone's already familiar with our objectives, let us proceed with today's discussion. So the remedial classroom. Remedial program helps students address language skills deficits by helping them acquire self-confidence in facing own weaknesses and overcome it. So in organizing a remedial program for your students, as language educators in the future, it is important that we first identify their areas of difficulties. So most of the time, students cannot classify it themselves. That's why it is necessary for us educators to be aware of the common language deficits or impairments. Noticeable symptoms of which includes difficulty in finding the right words, or having problems with reading, or perhaps struggling to learn new words, and so much more. But then again, diagnosis is not our duty, but we can refer them. Also, it is necessary for us teachers to have at least an idea of how to manage these. Since we are talking about probable programs that we can conduct at the school level, transcending how we can build self-confidence among the students will be the top priority. I guess this is the beginning of everything. Once the students felt that they are capable of learning or speaking the language, overcoming their fears and weaknesses and any other else will follow. Assessment must be conducted before organizing a remedial program. Consistent monitoring is imperative in managing the program. Of course, we cannot help them if we don't know where and how to start. Through assessment, we are given the right boundaries and limits so that we can organize a specific and more fitting program for them. In the duration of the remedial program, monitoring your learners' progress is important because even during the process, there might still be flaws or noticeable weaknesses in the program that you formulated. That's why checking what works for them and what slows down their progress are crucial. It gives you an idea of what to prioritize and what to remove in your plan. For additional information, there are two kinds of remediation that we often incorporate in a remedial classroom. So first is the pull-out remediation. This is basically pulling out the student from the class, especially since some students get distracted easily by other classmates. I mean, the noise and the distraction and all that. But the disadvantage of this is that the student might feel a little isolated, they might feel a little left out from the class if we do this kind of remediation. That's why we have to be very careful in using this. Second is the push-in remediation. So students with minimal need for assistance were often put into this form of remediation. The teacher, who will offer remedial sessions, would just sit in with the student in the middle of the class and assist the student. But the disadvantage of this kind of remediation could be the student might feel negatively different from the others because he is experiencing special assistance with his or her teacher. That's why the student might feel a little different from them. So be careful in using this remediation. So I hope everything's still clear so far. Let us proceed with the next. So Strickland of 1998 and Vaca and Gove of 1991 cited these general instructional guidelines to organize a remedial program. So first, instruction is systematic when it is planned, deliberate in an application, and proceeds in an orderly manner. This does not mean a rigid progression of one-size-fits-all teaching. So for this first, likewise to any other plan, procedure, and instruction, organizing a remedial program follows a systematic process. The program should follow your ready-made plan to be more time efficient, to be discrete in learning, and to make the program easier for your students. But then again, it is important to classify what type of learner you have in the remedial classroom. A teacher must be versatile in formulating programs, meaning we shouldn't limit ourselves into one instructional strategy only. Say for example, we have a visual, we have an oral, and we have a kinesthetic learner in our class. We have to design programs suitable for their learning needs, for these multiple learning needs. Not because it is more convenient for us teachers to conduct or to formulate instructional strategies addressing, let's say, the visual learners, doesn't mean we have to focus on this instructional strategy only. Identifying our learners is just as important. So identifying their learning needs should come first before formulating our instructional strategy. So I hope that's clear. Next. Intensive instruction in any particular skill or strategy should be based on need. Thus, the intensity will vary both with individuals and groups. So, just like what I have mentioned a while ago, we must formulate programs strictly based on their learning needs. Their style in learning and what they need the most would be some of the topmost considerations. But since intensive instructions are based on need, it will vary for both individuals and groups. It is easier for individual learners since we can focus on one strategy alone. But when we say group, it will be more complex for them since we are meeting multiple and diverse types of learners and learning needs. That's why we have to be more versatile when doing so. Hope that's clear. Next. There is no substitute for ongoing documentation and monitoring of learning to determine the order in which skills should be addressed and the level of intensity required to help a child or group of children succeed in a particular area. So let us compare this with assessment for learning. I'm quite sure that you already heard the difference between assessment for learning and assessment of learning. So the latter is made to check what has been learned by your students to date. So assessment of learning helps the teacher in informing the parents and the school administration of the student's academic performance so far. While the prior, the assessment for learning, is made to check what to do next after the learning process. So it gives the teacher an idea of whether to proceed with the next topic or extend the previews to deepen the learning. But with remedial program, there could be none like this. Unlike in usual day-to-day discussion, the assessment for learning could be documented for future references. The remedial program does not amplify the same privilege because learning needs of students in a remedial classroom or program varies from time to time. It's dynamic and it is unpredictable. That's why formulating such program comes only every after assessment. So identifying this firsthand is difficult. That's why we need to conduct assessments first before we can actually design a remedial program. So assessment always comes first when doing or designing a remedial program. Take note of that. Next, to track specific goals and objectives within an integrated language arts framework, teachers must know the instructional objectives their curriculum requires at the grade or year level they teach. So this is particular in the parent when designing a remedial program. Being aware of the learning objectives or goals helps us teachers in designing a limited program. So when we say limited program, we are concerning time, we are concerning the attention of the students and the span of time they will engage with our program. So we shall not overwhelm our students. We should be direct with learning, be more specific and coherent. Especially remedial programs should feel conducive for their learning, and we shall not make the students feel that remedial programs are like extra baggage to carry as they progress academically. So take note that remedial programs are there to help them academically and not to make them feel like they are taking extra classes, they have to survive another class. So please take note of that importance. So now that we have a deeper understanding of the remedial classroom and its guidelines, I sincerely hope that everything is still clear and understandable so far. So let us now proceed with organizing a remedial program. So organizing a remedial program follows systematic steps and a rigorous process. Since we are formulating a program, we must identify a lot of factors for our students. It is also important to take note that we shall make a program that students shall enjoy while learning, rather than an extra subject that they still have to persist. So there are 3 factors that we have to consider in designing a remedial program, including the curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So there are factors that we have to consider under these 3. So first, for the curriculum, base goals and standards for language learning on theory and research. So in strategizing your curriculum in a remedial classroom, our objectives must be research-based. Provides us coherent and efficient data that if we use these goals, we are more likely to end successfully. Also, by backing up it with theories, we are at ease that there have been chunks of evidence providing its sufficiency. So since we are integrating extra classes for our students, It is important to be cohesive and accurate when we are designing or formulating curriculum or objective. Next factor, relate teacher beliefs and knowledge about instruction to research. Again, so still, anchoring your teaching style to research is a necessity. What's good about aligning your belief to research is that it's backed up with concrete evidence. So since we are backing up our beliefs with research, they are more likely, they've been proven, we have concrete evidence, so that's going to be helpful. Provides you as a teacher a sense of security and confidence that what you are doing is necessary and proficient. Research is done for us to obtain factual data helpful in overcoming daily life circumstances. The same is true with teaching. If we incorporate our pedagogy on research, especially on the most trusted journal in education, our teaching style will be more effective and timely. Next factor, organize the curriculum framework so that it is usable. So that's important. Your curriculum framework on a remedial classroom should be allied with the students' learning needs. Again, so more reason for us to recognize and design it the way it addresses your learners' concern in learning. We should strategize our framework suitable for them, so most especially if they are experiencing difficulties in language learning or just learning in general. Next factor. Select materials that facilitate the accomplishment of school goals. So choosing the right instructional materials to use in a remedial classroom is vital. This is where instruction often starts. Learning material is good when it is anchored to the curriculum's objectives as well as accommodates your students' learning needs and style. Do not use learning tools that are only efficient because it suits your teaching style. It should be the student's or the learner's comfort first before ours. So take note of that. The most important factor that we have to consider in selecting a learning material is the student's ability and skills, as well as we should consider the goals of the school when they are producing learners. When they are we have school goals that we are often not familiar with, so that's why it is important to anchor these school goals with the materials and the objectives that we are formulating for this remedial program. So now that we are done with the factors for the curriculum, let us proceed for instruction. The program must identify instructional strategies and activities for learners. So aligned to my previous explanation, it is crucial to formulate programs and instructions that will cater to your learners' needs and skills. This is the reason why assessment before remedial programs are done. So I've been telling you from time to time that before formulating or designing a remedial program, it is important to conduct assessments first. It is for us to identify their strengths and weaknesses in learning or in language learning. Identifying their strategies in learning will help us in the course of program making. Our program should be learner-centered. So since we are accommodating them, we are addressing their learning needs, it is important to really identify how they learned through the course. Next, instruction must be based upon what we know about the effective teaching of language skills. So what we meant here of what we know as effective teaching language skills will be based on the research and theories that we gathered, as I have mentioned a while ago. It is important for us language teachers that we do our investigation first before instruction. That is why we have to carefully choose the most effective language teaching that we will incorporate in our remedial classroom. But then again, we shall not limit ourselves with one-size-fits-all teaching. We should be researching more, investigating more teaching styles, and learning how we can apply it in our classroom or in our remedial programs that will help us in addressing different and multiple learning needs and learning styles. So we should not limit ourselves with one. Let's be more flexible. Next. Those involved in designing or selecting instructional activities need to consider the variables that contribute to success in language learning, given its interactive and constructive nature. So during the instruction process, language teachers who are responsible for choosing the rightful activities should consider which of which will guarantee successful language learning. Since we are catering to students who have difficulties in language learning, it is important to be strict and concise in choosing tasks for them. These activities should be interactive as well as practical, meaning we have to be more direct in selecting materials given that we are constrained in time. So we have to really take note of time because we are incorporating an extra class or extra learning session for them. That's why it is necessary for us to be time conscious, given that ideally we're only given, let's say, 40 minutes to 1 hour. 1 hour is the maximum for every remedial class or remedial program. So let's be extra careful with that and let's use our time wisely. So next, time must be provided in the classroom for practice. So this is important. Time, as mentioned a while ago, is critical in a remedial classroom. Since remedial makes an impression of extra class to take, just like what I have mentioned, we have to be more time conscious. Suggestively, as I've mentioned, every remedial session only lasts for, let's say, 40 minutes. And for special cases, it must only last for an hour. So it's important that we design programs that is time-wise, that is time conscious, because our challenge here is to engage the students in this extra class. Next, composing should be an integral part of the program. So in order to promote language learning, one integral part of making it more meaningful is to provide an opportunity where students can compose. Composing helps the students to develop their writing skills as well as their vocabulary. So when we say composing, students entail themselves on activities like writing activities or perhaps vocabulary activities and all that. Since we are targeting a language remedial classroom, it is still a necessity to provide chances for them to improve on some areas pertaining to English language learning and development. Next, students should be given opportunities to become independent and to self-monitor their progress. So this is quite tricky. Independent learning promotes students into developing their critical thinking skills. Moreover, being given the chance to learn on their own helps the students to rediscover and recognize their abilities. Gaining such an opportunity boosts their confidence and heightens their self-esteem. Also, by monitoring themselves, they get to understand where they usually excel and what areas need more attention to improve. So, being self-conscious of what you're best at and what you think you're still lacking and needs improvement actually helps students to really learn and understand themselves more. This sense of responsibility for learning mostly reinforces a positive attitude towards learning. So when students are aware of where they are best at, where they think they have quite or they are quite a little, or they are like weak in learning, gives them a sense of responsibility that I should work on this. I should really focus on this since I am lacking on this. So given those, they are like building a sense, they're like building a positive sense of like duty for themselves to improve and enhance their learning more. I hope that's clear. Next. The climate in a school must be conducive to the development of students. So basically, when we say climate, it means that we must make sure that the surrounding of our remedial classroom is easy for the students to learn. The environment should not be messy. Everything should be organized. So as much as possible, make it more spacious and pleasing for the students if the facility is available. And ventilation of the classroom is also important because the overall climate or the feeling inside the classroom is important for students when they are learning. Schools must promote a greener environment for students because it helps them to calm their minds when learning. So if you could have noticed, schools are more greener in the environment because they're building this sense of calmer surrounding for students when learning. Breathing fresh air will help them, or will help the students when studying, especially for remedial programs. Next. The school must develop an organizational structure that meets individual needs of students. So oftentimes these are overlooked, and for remedial programs, we shall take note of this. So this is mostly overlooked in school. It is important that we introduce the school's administration to our students. Certain people will help them in areas we teachers couldn't meet. Also, it gives them a sense of familiarity and oneness with the school if they know who the people around them are. If they have specific needs pertaining to their health, they can approach the school's aide or the nurse. Concerns regarding their mental health could be forwarded to their school's guidance counselor. You see, it is crucial that we introduce such people to our students, especially since our 21st century learners are developing more learning needs in time. That's why we have to cope and keep up with them. So we cannot really accommodate them in all of the needs that they have. That's why it is important that we introduce to our students certain people or specific people who can help them with what they need. Next, for the instruction, the program must provide for coordination among all language programs offered in the school. Integration of some areas of learning inside the school could also help students to improve in the duration of the remedial program. Some students have preferences, or we can say favorite subjects at school. That's why if we're able to touch those and incorporate them in learning, engagement in activities will most likely arise. This also happens when we are doing usual day-to-day classes, so we can also incorporate them during remedial programs. Also, some language used in the premise could also help them when integrated. provides a keen logic of understanding towards each other. So, certain dialect or language used inside the school should also be integrated in the remedial program for better communication, for better understanding. So now that we are familiar with the factors underlining or supporting the instruction factor in organizing a remedial program, let us now proceed for the assessment. So for assessment, use assessment to guide instruction. So assessment judges the end result of your remedial classroom. The success of your program will be determined once you have conducted the assessment. Anchoring your instruction to the assessment will help you as the teacher as well as the learners. So being guided by the assessment will help your instruction be more thorough and cohesive. Since you are following a certain goal to achieve on your end means, your instruction will be easier. The same is true with your students. Setting certain standards for them will make learning easier and more possible for them. So, when we are giving them usual limits or standards to meet, it is easier for them now to act and to perform since these certain standards are given. Next, develop scoring guides and rubrics. I'm confident that we education students are aware of how scoring guides and rubrics are because there are certain courses that we already took for formulating rubrics. So they give a detailed explanation as to how we will grade our students' output. So it is important. This will guide both the students and the teacher on how to perform and how to assess. So it's hitting two birds with one stone. So when we have rubrics, the students can perform accordingly since they are guided with what to perform, and the teachers are guided as well of how to assess them. Next, last for assessment, seek alignment among various layers of assessment, just like how we assess on a daily lesson or on a day-to-day basis. There are various ways of assessing that we have to consider. Depending on the objective and goal of the remedial program, assessment should be studied very well, since it will determine whether we were able to successfully execute our remedial program. We shall follow the concrete way of assessing. So that would be all for organizing a remedial program. So before we continue with our next discussion, let's have a short recap of our previous topic. We first defined and identified what is a remedial classroom. We highlighted that remedial classroom aims to address language deficits and experienced by our students. By helping them gain self-confidence and overcome weaknesses in language learning, it is necessary for us to adapt programs suitable for their learning needs and styles. In addition, we also discussed the general instructional guidelines that will help us to better conduct and organize remedial classrooms. So in general, we classified that an effective remedial classroom shall be conducted in an orderly manner with a flexible teaching style meeting the needs of the students. We also learned the idea that students need changes from time to time, thus making it dynamic for every instance, as well as the importance of knowing the target goals of the lesson to amplify a better learning experience for them. Through our last discussion, we learned as well that organizing a remedial classroom should be categorized into three aspects: curriculum planning and organization, efficient instruction devising, and suitable assessment tool. Since we already had a recall of our previous discussion, let us now continue. So in designing a remedial program, one must know the components of it. This will help us better formulate the program based on the most ideal, efficient, and applicable to the learning needs of our students. So here are the components of an ideal remedial program devised by Manzo and Manzo of 1993. So there are 6 components to consider. We have orientation, direct instruction, reinforcement and extension, schema enhancement, personal emotional growth, and cognitive development. So we will explain it one by one. First is orientation. Provides continuity and focus to the remedial session. Maybe an engaging question or statement related to local or national news or even school life. It must focus on structured routines, materials, equipment, venue, people involved, and the objective of the program. So for the first component, for every remedial session, it is important that we identify and record continuity or progresses. Although, as much as possible, we promote a self-progress report on our students, it is also necessary that we observe them on our own. It is not just for the sole purpose of recognizing their improvement by checking their progress. We are also able to identify the sudden flaws and lapses of our program so that we can prevent using them again in the future. In order to do this, we can amplify one leading question before starting the program, or maybe ask them relatable questions, mostly about school. We can also conduct small and short activities that will heighten their engagement. Just make sure that it wouldn't consume the rest of your remedial class. Nevertheless, do not forget the purpose of your orientation, which is to simply check on their progress, serve as continuity, and start the program with full engagement. So, we have mentioned a while ago that there should be routines. We shall consider materials or equipments that we will use, the venue, people involved, and the objective of the program. Since the purpose of orientation is like an introduction of the remedial program, we shall take into consideration that routines are important because it gives a sense of organization for the remedial program. Materials and equipments are also important. We have to specify what to use so that we won't be, feel a little lost in the rest of the program. And the venue, of course, we have mentioned a while ago how ventilation and the conducive of the environment is important. People involved, we shall really specify and identify who are the people or the persons involved or responsible in this program. And of course, the objective of the program, we shall not forget to mention and explain the objective of the program to our students so that they are aware and they know what they have to achieve at the end of the program. So for the next component, direct instruction component, the instructional heart of the remedial session. It should never be traded away even for one period without some compelling reason. Ever since the beginning of our discussion, I have been mentioning the component of direct instruction or direct learning. Since we have a very limited time in the remedial program, it is important that we are time-wise. We shall instruct the students directly so that we are able to maximize our time. It is the heart of remedial, especially because this is where learning happens or learning occurs. It is a necessity for us to compose instructions that are direct and meaningful for them so that we can obtain likable and direct results as well. So by giving direct instructions, you're able to obtain and receive direct results as well from them. So they are more likely measurable and we can we can gather this data for future references. For the next component, I hope everything's still clear. Reinforcement and extension. So this period of time ideally should build on the direct instructional period and be spent in empowered reading, writing, and discussion of what was read. Writing activities may vary from simply listing keywords to summarizing and reacting. So during this time on your remedial program, it is essential that we employ activities like reading, writing, or perhaps discussing what is being read. This will provide additional learning and extra experience for your students. Excuse me. Since we are pertaining to enhancing the language efficiency of our learners, it will be helpful if we can engage in some activities like this in the program. Reinforcing opportunities for language learning can also enhance their abilities as well as build a positive impact on their self-confidence. So by instigating some activities that will help them or that will ensure continuity of language learning based on its domains, reading, writing, listening, viewing, and such, will really help and contribute to the overall success of language learning of our students. I hope that's clear. So for the next component, Schema-Enhancement Component. So this unit of time should be spent in building a knowledge base for further reading and independent thinking. It is an ideal time to teach study skills such as outlining, note-taking, and memory training. So for every session, since our learners in the remedial classroom already experienced language deficiency, it is important that we also provide them not just compensational sessions for language learning only, but also lessons that will help them in the future in improving their ways of studying. So we have to provide and suggest ways on how they can prevent and avoid recurring problems in the future. For that, we can employ activities or perhaps time for study skills teaching. We can teach them how to outline, especially in writing. Note-taking during lessons is also important for students to learn. It encourages and promotes continuous learning since they are able to write as well as to listen. So the implant of learning or the continuity of learning is possible. And by doing so, students get to understand the lesson while taking down notes. So memory training is also helpful, especially in lessons that entail objective responses. So that's schema enhancement component. Next is personal emotional growth development. So when we say personal emotional growth development, there is little learning or consequence that can occur without the learner's involvement and anticipation of personal progress. Actually, in this part, we have to consider in an ideal remediation program how we can develop the emotional growth of our students. We especially mentioned a while ago that how self-confidence is important when conducting a remedial class. This helps them to improve and develop on their own, sometimes without them actually knowing. Heightening the affective objective in our remedial program will strengthen students' engagement and cooperation in class. Unconsciously, sometimes without full intent, we are implanting on our students a positive behavior towards learning. Suggestively, we have to be more concise and specific in doing this. But then again, for some instances, this just comes out naturally in a class. So that's a lucky part of conducting a remedial program. But if it is possible that we can specify this area, it's more helpful. And for the last component, cognitive development component. This component should contain an attempt to enhance basic thinking operations such as inference, abstract verbal reasoning, analogical reasoning, constructive or critical creative reading, convergent and divergent analysis, problem solving, and metacognition. For the last component of an ideal remediation program, our target is to improve the cognitive area among our students. We have to develop their inference. This will be achieved when they are able to draw conclusions based on evidence and reasoning. Abstract verbal reasoning will be attained when students were able to understand and analyze utilizing complex concepts such as isolating reality from ideas and principles. Analogical reasoning will help students in finding commonalities and relationships between two situations or maybe ideas, which could be in a form of a Venn diagram. This is a common way of promoting analogical reasoning. Critical reading, wherein your learners could critically analyze and draw principles based on texts read. Convergent analysis entails them to conclude one specific solution, while divergent analysis will improve their creativity in finding solutions through a variety of procedures. And metacognition, which will help students think about thinking. This, since we aim to let them monitor their own progress, will aid learners to understand their own learning process. Most of this should reflect on the remedial program that we are aiming to conduct on our students' end. So remember, when we are designing a remedial program for our students, there are a series of factors that we have to contemplate or to ponder on. This is an entire and wide process. That's why assessment should be done and multiple principles should be taken into consideration. As future teachers, we have to be knowledgeable enough, especially that we will accommodate such learning needs in the future. To become the most efficient teacher is to be aware of the worst cases and being able to know how to solve them. It will be all for this course packet. I hope you learned something. Thank you.